Hello everyone. This is the chapter which deals with the international news agencies. Now, before talking about international news agencies, I would like to ask a question. Since you won't be available for an answer, I'll answer it myself for you. Like, when you need information about something, what do we do normally? Like, how do we get that information? Our first choice to get information. Well, I can speak for myself, and I think for many amongst you also, that I Google it. Google in 2006 was managing 8 billion pages a day. That's monopoly over information. That's monopoly over knowledge. That's monopoly over our frames of reference, the way we think about the world, the way we see it. News agencies have lost to Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, Amazon in different ways. Like Amazon has a direct control over Washington Post. Google, Yahoo, Microsoft became the main sources of information where everybody gets information. But this was the role that the news agencies were playing before the World War and also after the Second World War. The term Big Three basically means four news agencies, UPI and AP. UPI is not much in the game right now, and AP from the US, AFP, Agence France Presse from France, and Reuters from England. There are also smaller players like DPA, the German news agency, but they are not that influential. Our present day competitor is basically Xinhua, the Chinese news agency, which is increasingly getting more powerful by virtue of the power of Chinese over world affairs. So another point to note is that the role of international news agencies have always remained something that is directly connected to the power of their owners. Now, the news agencies were owned by governments. Even if they started independently, governments controlled that. The agency that really survived the Second World War, the first one too, was Reuters. Then Agence France Presse and definitely the US owned UPI and AP remained in the game. What do the news agencies do? News agencies basically give you information about the whole world. They collect information from all across the globe and they send it to everybody. The aim of the news agencies is not to convince you about anything, like they don't have any direct contact with audiences. Rather, they look for clients who buy information. These clients are most of the time news organizations around the globe. But that's not the whole story. News agencies also represent their countries, their policies, like the three big owned by England, France, and the US, even shape the image of more other industrialized countries, like of Germany, for example, or of Holland, or of Japan, and all these countries are given global representation through these news agencies. And that's why news agencies remain the center of a lot of controversies also over many decades. And one very interesting thing is that news agencies are also the biggest employers of foreign correspondents in the world, because sometimes news organizations like any newspaper or television, they are not able to maintain their staff in different countries because of many reasons. Might be change of policies, change of priorities, lack of resources, diversion of resources from one activity to the other, and all these things that happen in international newsrooms in their headquarters are important in terms of foreign news gathering. And at times they don't have their people, but news agencies make sure that they have people everywhere. It's a dying business, honestly, and we'll see how it's dying. The chapter that you have has a few parts, and it's really interesting to see that it deals with the initial idea, and then what's the role of news agencies in satellite aid, and then the third one is market for international news, where those could be sold, the internet and the international news gathering, and impact of the internet, and we see alternative news agencies. These are different parts. We will discuss those. There is really interesting that news gathering, which was monopolized by news agencies, was then further monopolized by individuals. Like a South African journalist represented all the news agencies and the newspapers, almost all of them, in South Africa and nearby countries. So the whole information going from that part of the world to every news agency and every organization was owned by a single guy. 1978, I wrote his name, it's interesting, Ian Mills. Like Ian Mills was a person who in BBC established this fact in 1978. He was also working for the BBC, that he was just controlling the whole information about a big region, and he was giving it to the rest of the world. So when we look at all this kind of news gathering without any humane agenda. There might be an agenda of the governments or whoever runs those organizations, but they don't have any humane agenda, and this has become one of the biggest concerns in the debate about imbalance in the flow of information and the new world information and communication order. But let's move from topic to topic. Like news agencies' influence is lessening. The first and foremost dampener was the age of satellite television. Like when you were able to transmit images through satellites, CNN became one of the biggest competitors because through the cable network they were reaching everywhere, and they had the same language of monopoly which news agencies had, English. So in English language, basically AP and Reuters were not as successful as it was CNN. But still many countries' newspapers used to have and television organizations used to have wire services, and most of the information given by these news agencies was considered to be credible. They kept their credibility. Now the problem with them was that their selection of the theme and the way they slanted to do that was a problem. And also in countries and organizations where they have less staff and less capacity to analyze, news agencies also had a photo service. UPI was known for that, AP is known for that, and also syndicate columns, and also there was kind of ready-made like opinion content. So whenever something happened in any part of the world, news agencies used to offer you with detailed analysis of the situation. They had those ready. They had kind of copywriters who kept it ready, number of editors who used to do that, and these were information which were at a par with any big organization like early in Times or Newsweek analysis or Washington Post or New York Times analysis, they were the same. So if some Urdu newspaper in Pakistan had in Peshawar or in Quetta or in Lahore or Multan, anywhere, they had services, they will get those articles, and what they have to do is, if it's an English language organization, they will just publish it, courtesy the news organization, or they will translate it in their own local language. So this just gave them a lot of power over news gathering. But we see that in the age of satellite, news agencies lost their control over the narrative. What happened because of the internet? We see that Google became one of the biggest information providers, and also we see a change in the way we use information. The use and gratification model is also at work, because most of us go to the internet and get the news. We don't look for newspapers and television. So newspapers and television are most of the time restricted to local news, and their interest in global news is minimum, because they know that people are getting that information from other sources, and that's also one reason why the news agencies lost their control. And this also forced global news agencies to partner with local players, and the birth of citizen journalism through the global news agencies, which was a conflict of interest if you look at it. But more importantly, when we see the question of impact of the internet on news agencies, is that basically and also the what we call the neoliberal economies. In the neoliberal economies, anybody with the money can just buy any news organization. So if on the one hand we always criticize Rupert Murdoch for being a media mogul, on the other hand there are people, multinational corporations, that are buying news agencies or all sources of news gathering, like Amazon. Jeff Bezos has a lot of control over news because he controls a lot of information. Or many other people, like Disney is buying stuff, and so these are the new monopols. Basically, what they do, we don't know where their interest lies. We don't know where Mark Zuckerberg's interest lies. Naturally, we know that he wants to earn more and more money, and he would sell it for good price. Anything he would sell it. But from state-controlled and news agencies, which were kind of supportive of their national political or diplomatic agenda, we come into an age where individuals and multinational corporations, headed by individuals who don't have any national interest except that they live in a country, they don't really care. And they don't have we don't know their value system, the way they value things, the way they make decisions, because nation states were predictable, but the new players are unpredictable and they own the whole thing. So, and they just don't think global, they don't think local, they just think personal. And what if all these people get into a clash with each other? What if they decide to have a narrative that is really alien, that doesn't have any context? They can do that because they control those organizations, and this is one of the biggest worries. So global media ownership is another problem. Like people who are on the internet and who are controlling the internet, most of the time they are new global media owners. And also there is one question: people think that most of the time, like blogging is something that is independent, but research shows that bloggers, they don't create original content. They rather gather content from one place and another. Sorry, I'm fine. I'm not sick, but it's just I'm coughing. I'm fine. I need a glass of water, but I'll just fetch it later. So we see that internet is creating newer ways of of giving information and forming opinions. But at the basis of that, the sources of these individual players, the sources of information of these individual players are again tied to the mainstream news narrative. So these guys are not getting some information which is new, but rather they are selecting information from different sources which are fed either by news agencies or these or Google or Amazon or whosoever, or the mainstream media. So the point here is that the imbalance in the flow of information remains, despite the fact that there are many alternative news structures in place. But as I mentioned earlier, one, they use the same news value system, and two, they don't have enough money. So most of the alternative organizations were bought by the mainstream organizations, and the way organizations are being swallowed, like media organizations, the new monopolies are shaping up. Like in India, for example, the Ambanis are being criticized for building a narrative and also by literally running the government. The same could be said about Mark Zuckerberg. He's rather controlling the whole of the world. You can criticize them as much as you wish, and you can post the criticism on their own web portals. Like you can put criticism of Mark Zuckerberg on Facebook. Nobody cares, because, and this part of the new of the emergence of new control of information is really scary. It's scarier than its historical antecedents. We really have to reconsider the way we do international journalism, and we have to see how many players are in place right now. And the shift from states to individuals with a lot of money and no responsibility is dangerous. Thank you.